Yeah, I'm actually working on a book, a, a quick book that's trying to put what's happening with Trump in some context. To sort of say this guy's not a Martian; he didn't come from outer space. He's really the culmination of a series of trends, cultural and political and economic, in some strange way, the sort of logical outcome of the road we were on. So it's drawing on work from my previous books about the history of neoliberalism and branding, which is my first book. It sort of brought me back to my roots when I wrote No Logo, where when I finished No Logo, 15 years ago, I guess now, more, God, 17 years ago. I'd spent so much time in the world of marketing and branding that I just was allergic to it. I didn't want to hear anything more about advertising. But I don't think there's any way you can understand how we ended up with the Trump without understanding just the triumph of the brand, of taking over all aspects of life, because he really is the ultimate example of that. Now he's turned the White House into his brand extension, right? And he has this family. The Americans have, they don't have a first family, they have a first family of brands, right? They've got the, spin-off brands with the kids and the wife, and they're all, bound and determined to profit in every way possible from the presidency, to sell their brands. And, you see that so clearly with, here's Trump with this brand that means, wealth and power and success, and now Mar-a-Lago has doubled its membership fees because it was always about sort of proximity to wealth and power, but now it's proximity to the most powerful position in the world. They've turned the U.S. presidency into a reality TV show. I mean, look at what they're doing. They're having security meetings right out in the open at Mar-a-Lago, and people are Facebooking and tweeting the pictures of the Prime Minister of Japan getting news about ballistic missile tests. So it's surreal, and I think I'm sort of writing about how we ended up in this bizarre place, inside this reality TV show that has very real human consequences, which is a kind of a sci-fi trope, right? The Hunger Games is all about, it's a reality TV show played to the death, and I feel like that's where Trump has brought us. We're in Trump's Hunger Games now. So yeah, that's what I'm working on, and also kind of applying the thesis of No Logo to this moment, and also applying the thesis of the shock doctrine to this moment in terms of understanding how they're using speed and disorientation, and also how they, I think, can be counted on to exploit future shocks and future crises, to push through even more draconian attacks on civil liberties and an even more radical pro-corporate agenda. I think there's a lot of chaos in the Trump administration. There's a lot of competing interests. It's really a battleground, right? Mm-hmm. He has aligned himself with these extremely right-wing nationalists, xenophobes, and he also has brought in the corporate world into the White House as never before, really, in terms of it's this cabinet of multimillionaires and billionaires, mm-hmm. And so I think there's a real tension between what many of these CEOs know is in the best interest of their companies and what Trump needs, mm-hmm. to hold on to this base he has cobbled together, he's created. And there's definitely a tension, right? Because it's a new kind of political coalition, and because of that, he's made these often quite conflicting promises, including this promise to bring back manufacturing, yes. Create all these jobs. This is a mirage. He's not going to be able to do it. He's counting on being able to market a few sort of high-profile events that would have happened anyway. The CEOs are all understand, mm-hmm. that they can repackage things they were already planning to do, or some very small initiative, and then Trump as the master marketer, will stand and say, I created, thousands and thousands of jobs and so on. The question is, how long is this going to work, right? And as his base becomes restless because they aren't getting a better economy, in fact, he's attacking middle class and working class protections in so many ways. My concern is that then the racism, then the xenophobia, then the anti-immigrant part of his platform becomes even more important, right? So I don't think we've seen the worst of his anti-Mexican and also broadly anti-immigrant attacks. I think it's going to get worse before he turns on those people, and I do believe he will. I think in the end, Steve Bannon will get fired. So I think the thing with Justin Trudeau is, one of the dangers of Trump, right? We know the sort of obvious dangers of Trump, but a less obvious danger of Trump is that he has lowered the bar so much that now it takes very, very little to look good in comparison. So that's sort of the problem we have in Canada, is that our Prime Minister is getting so much love and adoration just for not being Donald Trump, and just sort of like he sends out a tweet, that's very nice about how Canada welcomes refugees in the whole world, blows him kisses for it. But in fact, Canada's not doing nearly enough to welcome refugees. It's not a safe haven for refugees who are having to flee the United States or have been refused entry into the United States, because there's actually a law. It's an agreement. It's called the Safe Third Country Agreement, which says that because we consider the United States a safe country, if you apply to come to the United States and are refused, you can't then apply to Canada, which is really bad right now. So there's Justin Trudeau saying, on the night that that the Muslim travel ban came into effect, Justin Trudeau tweeted that we welcome refugees. But the facts don't match up with the tweets. So our job in Canada is to sort of say that yes, the rhetoric is great, but we need to do much, much more to live up to it in the Trump era. And that's true for refugee rights. It's true also for climate action, precisely because the United States is now in this criminally negligent space. It doesn't mean that the rest of the world can feel good about themselves, right? Because at least we're not denying climate change, and at least we haven't appointed a CEO of a major oil transnational as our foreign secretary. No, we need to do more. Yes. If we want to claim any climate leadership, as our government does, then that means we need to do far more, and we already weren't doing enough. So Justin Trudeau is a master marketer. He's just a different kind of marketer than Trump. He's wow. Sorry to, I know we need to cling to any illusions possible but no, I mean, I think, look, I would much rather have that kind of marketer, because he gives us something we can hold him to. Trump doesn't give us much to hold him to, but Justin Trudeau actually, by making these claims to climate change leadership, to human rights leadership, to feminist leadership, it actually gives social movements a lot to work with to hold him to that marketing. The danger is the Obama phenomenon, where people just sort of demobilize and say, "Oh, great, we have our good guy, and now we can relax." And there's been a little of that in Canada, and my fear is that with Trump, there could be even more of that. But actually, people have been organizing in Canada a lot to push Justin Trudeau to do more. I live in Canada. My parents are American, and I have dual citizenship. The reason I live in Canada is because a previous generation of Trudeau's and his predecessor, his father's predecessor, welcomed Americans who didn't want to fight in Vietnam. My father was a conscientious objector, and they welcomed tens of thousands of war resistors, draft dodgers, and that was very meaningful. It was not just like tweeting it out, it's actually meaningful. So it shows that it is possible. They want us to believe that there's not much you can do to stand up to the United States because they're so economically powerful, so we all have to play the game. But in fact, there's a history, and I think particularly if maybe Mexico and Canada can work together to make sure that however NAFTA is renegotiated, it's renegotiated in the genuine interest of workers, in the genuine interest of the planet. Then we could have some combined power. And I think the same is true with Europe. Yeah, no, but we need to talk about this because what Trudeau right now is doing is PR for Trump. He just went to Europe and said, "Don't worry, we had a good meeting, very constructive," and he thinks he's going to constructively engage with Trump. Trump is a guy who understands power and money. Yes. And anybody who thinks they're just going to, win things by flattering and sucking up to him is dreaming. So Scott Pruitt is. It's a scandal that he's even being considered for this position. His main interaction with the agency he's now heading has been to sue it, has been to launch a series of lawsuits against the Environmental Protection Agency for doing its job. He's absolutely aligned with the fossil fuel interests in his state, which has seen this massive explosion, many literal explosions of fracking in particular, but also oil and coal. His state is a disaster area. There have been an explosion of earthquakes that many believe are linked to fracking, including the EPA, and so he has not. He's incredibly negligent in his responsibilities to protect the health and welfare of the people in his state, and now he's moving to the national stage. It's part of a pattern of Trump's appointees, where he's appointing the actual politicians he is appointing as opposed to the CEOs that he's appointing. Their main qualification seems to be that they don't believe in the existence of the agencies that they are being appointed to head, right? So this is true for housing, this is true for education, this is, he's appointed an education secretary who doesn't believe in public education and has devoted her life to dismantling public education. And so Scott Pruitt is within that pattern where he doesn't believe in the mission of the EPA. He's part of a movement within the United States with Republicans that have long sought to really kill the EPA. The incredible irony is many of the laws that he challenges were introduced by a Republican president, Richard Nixon, which kind of shows just how off the map the Republicans, now are. But to me, I have to say, yes, I'm upset about Scott Pruitt, but the fact that the CEO of Exxon is the Secretary of State is so beyond the realm of anything, science fiction, right? That, Scott Pruitt is an underling of Rex Tillerson, right? I mean, all of these guys have been, taking orders really from the fossil fuel industry, Exxon most of all, for so many years, right? And, Scott Pruitt denies climate change while Rex Tillerson plays the moderate and says, oh, it's happening, but it's not that bad. But the whole funding of the climate change denial movement and the funding of these right-wing politicians can be linked directly to Exxon. So they need to be perceived to be somehow moderate. But in fact, they're the reason why this whole network of climate change deniers exists in the first place. Or they're one of the main reasons. They've poured tens of millions of dollars into that doubt, we call it the doubt machine, the denial machine. So it's a scary moment, Yes. My friends in the climate movement are determined to make it as difficult as possible for Scott Pruitt to even get to work in the morning. I think we're going to see a permanent blockade outside the EPA. Yeah. That's what I'm hearing. I think that Trump certainly is awakening something in people, and there is this extraordinary level of mobilization, and so part of the message of what I'm trying to bring to this moment is resistance is incredibly important, but resistance is not enough, because Trump is a product of a real political and economic and cultural crisis, and that Trumpism is not going to be defeated unless there is a real alternative that people see and have faith in and are excited about. And that's what I tried to map in This Changes Everything, about how climate change could be a catalyst for a transformation of our economy, so that it meets real needs, and is not at war with people or the planet. And so I still believe that. In fact, I believe in it more passionately. And so what I want, my message to the sort of social movements in this moment is we have to do this incredibly tricky thing of resisting and fighting for the alternative at the same time, because just the no is not enough. There has to be a no and a yes that's woven together. And that's very, very hard, because people are fighting on all fronts in that no space. And that's what a sort of shock administration, that's the space it forces people into by this sort of tsunami approach to legislation, right? People are scrambling. And so, where are you supposed to find the space to say what you actually want? Because even if you win every defensive battle in this moment, where we would still be catastrophic from a planetary perspective. And I would argue catastrophic from a human perspective, which is why somebody like Donald Trump was able to sell his snake oil in the first place.